Okay, I'm sorry. This one had me up till midnight last night, and I know they get worse here.
Oh no, dear.
I had two Zoom meetings first.
Okay, well that makes me
I
feel a
can't
little better,
blame you
but
for the
still,
whole thing.
you were up later than I was.
Oh, okay.
Oh, well, you're good. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna go in the little side gallery down here on the right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Good.
The whole thing here.
I've only seen photos of the large pieces and not where everything else was placed, so that's cool.
Come on in, come on in. Okay, so what you are standing in is an exhibit by Hanna. This is called Ceramics by, or Unsound, and it's ceramics pieces and kind of a couple mixed media pieces as well. So Hanna, I'll go ahead and just let you introduce yourself and kind of hand it over to you, and I'll kind of help answer or ask questions as we go along. So if you want to just explain a little bit about yourself and the exhibit.
Yeah, so I'm originally from San Diego. I went to school at Humboldt State University, and then I moved to the East Coast and went to Edinburgh University for grad school. And then after that, I lived on the East Coast for a while. I lived in Baltimore and Philadelphia, and I actually, during the pandemic, moved back to Southern California. So like you'll see that kind of transition in the work. The two pieces that are like all black hair, I made while I was in Philadelphia, and those are the last pieces I made on the East Coast, and they still have a lot of like architectural reference to them, and then kind of like this idea of like isolated figure, like lonely person. It felt like they were kind of like pandemic prediction pieces, like getting ready for a isolated time and something that a lot of us faced early on in the beginning. But then the rest of the pieces, there's kind of like there's a Southern California influence to them. So when I was moving, I drove over like I think I took probably like a week to drive across the U.S. And then as soon as I hit the desert and saw cactus again, and I was just so excited to see desert because I was like missing that part of my life a lot. So there's a lot of like references to cactuses, and I really like using them too because they're kind of menacing, and some of the pieces actually like hurt if you touch them, so you have to like pick them up properly. Yeah. But I don't know if you read all the artist statement and other other descriptions about the pieces. Actually don't have that in front of me.
So they all have a packet that has basically what you gave me and Christy. but they have not actually read or heard anything about the exhibit yet.
Okay. I mean, that's pretty much about the exhibit. It kind of says like where the heads, the influence behind the heads, and then the hair pieces are like a separate series. Yeah. So if there's any questions about those.
So I guess I'll start off with talking about one of the ones that I think people will be very interested in is the colored tone, and why the portraits in colored tone.
So in the description it kind of describes it, but for me I see them as kind of like there's something like off, there's something like diseased or off about them and intimidating about them. But I think I made these like during the pandemic, they're very like pandemic pieces to me, and I was drawing like a few like masked figures, and then I decided to make instead like large intimidating heads with like they're kind of hinting at the idea of like disease and germ, but they're still like I like what's the word for it? I like the contrast between keeping things like attractive and cute, but like kind of menacing, kind of a dark message too. So yeah.
Are the portraits or heads people you know? Some of these look like they might be self-portraits. Can you talk a little bit about the people?
They're usually just random characters I come up with. Sometimes they'll look similar to other ones I've done before, like like a character kind of continuing a narrative, but for the most part they're pretty random. I have painted friends, and then like I have used myself as well. But nothing's like a particular person, but sometimes I use that to disguise a narrative that I am talking about a person, but I don't want them to know, so I use kind of different features.
Could you talk a little bit about the reason for the neon sign and don't pop in this piece in particular?
Yeah, I feel like the neon gave me a chance to kind of use like short, like 1 to 2 word phrases that kind of mean a lot to me, or that they're really vague in their narrative too, but they pop out at you, and then I kind of, I could go between someone thinks about the word a lot, or they just see it and it's bright and it's neon and they don't think about that. But I like doing that in my work where someone needs to look at the piece again, or they need to spend a lot of time with it, but I want to make them so it's something you want to see more than once. But don't pop is kind of like another way of saying like don't lose your mind. And it actually, like a phrase to me has like a long narrative because I've used it for like a number of pieces. And some of the pieces where they're buildings and they have like a hot air balloon. But they're like bubble gum, so it'll eventually like pop and the building will fall. But I've just used it as a metaphor for like, don't lose your shit, basically.
So we have the two people that are kind of looking at each other. Is there a reason why you did a couple that were very large versus the grouping here of the smaller heads together?
I just wanted to make these pieces so I could actually like move them around, so they can stand alone, or they can stand in this installation together. but they're actually like separate pieces.
So this one here is one of my favorites of the telephone. And for those of you that haven't looked, this is actually two-sided. Could you talk a little bit about the story behind this piece?
I think a lot of what I was thinking about was not being like really happy about where I was living or feeling like I had much community there. So I was really like depending on my close friends, like just calling my friends a lot. But the piece was actually made before the pandemic, so I think I was feeling a lot of feelings that we were all gonna have in a way. But yeah, that's basically what that piece is about. It's like really like relying on the phone.
So on the back, could you explain a little bit about, so is this your friend on the back?
I'm very like mysterious about my pieces and I don't really like give it all away. But you'll see a figure with like a talking bubble and a disheveled room, and it's really like I honestly forget sometimes like what the original idea was, and narratives kind of become other things to me over time. So something made freshly might mean something else later. Sometimes I feel like, especially in the beginning when I'm coming up with, when I'm telling a narrative, it feels very contrived when I talk about it. But yeah, that piece in the back is like I guess it's like someone talking about their situation. You see kind of a disheveled room, and I put this like odd crackle glaze all over it.
Another one that I'd love to know a little bit more about is the almost look like straws in these characters. I know you want to keep things a little vague. Is there anything you wanted to share, particularly on maybe why the straws?
Yeah, a lot of my work has it says it in my artist statement a little bit, but a lot of the pieces with the tongues and kind of like fixation on the mouth is related to a series before where I was talking a lot about addiction and excess, and how I think a lot of people think they're like kind of above addiction, but everybody kind of has their own thing that they do that's comforting to them. So a lot of the kind of pieces where there's straws or tongues and is related to oral fixations and like chewing gum and smoking and stuff like that. So I've kind of always like come back to that in the work and applied it in different ways. But I don't know that anyone like looking at this piece now would go, oh, human excess, but it always kind of ties back to that for me.
Are there any other pieces in particular that you might want to speak about, either the stories behind them or maybe talking about their technique?
So they're obviously all hand built. I kind of built very uniquely with slabs, so they'll be like kind of like slab pieces. Like a lot of the faces and figures are made out of like rolling out slabs and assembling them. But they're all kind of made in parts and components and put together. And a lot of the pieces, like a lot of the hair pieces, are all foil built. Yeah. but I feel like I've done like a lot of workshops on building and kind of discussing like how I support certain things. Yeah. Any questions about building? Sorry, this is really early for me now. realizing that I sound like I just woke up, so.
She's in California, so the time zone is quite different. What time is it for you there?
7.
It's 7. Or it started at 7.
So some are hand built and some are coiled. Is it the larger pieces are, oh, I'm sorry, not slab built or coiled? So the larger, are the larger pieces coiled and built up that way?
Yeah, a lot of the larger ones are, and then like the heads, especially like so the large heads are actually it's all slab work. Those pieces are pretty new to me technically, the larger pieces. So they're actually really challenging to build. It's a lot of it's like fighting gravity, building that up.
How long do some of these larger pieces take you to create?
I'll build them pretty quickly and spend a lot of time in my studio while I'm doing them, but I would say like a month of just the building part. But it's kind of, I feel like all those the painting and kind of messing around with parts and like attaching components and stuff later, sometimes that takes up like the most amount of time. So. But it's hard to say, it like depends on how much I get to be in the studio. You know, having to teach a lot and do other things really like drags out the time longer than it would be normally.
Let's see. Is there anything you'd like to share as far as this piece here with the two people? I'm very interested to hear about the black, what it looks like might be coffee.
Yeah, I like using that. That was another thing that I use a lot in talking about addiction, but like kind of just poking fun at things and making light of it, but like coffee addiction. And so I've made like a number of pieces where the coffee's kind of spilling out everywhere, like just overdid the caffeine. But yeah, I have it like oozing down my face too. And then there's like a figure on the back spilling out. So there's a lot of moments in the work where there's kind of like loss of control and things spilling, and it just kind of adds to like I talk about like just chaos of life a lot more.
All right, we have just a couple more minutes left. Anything you'd like to share about these two pieces here?
Yeah, I made them in California, but they have a lot of like that East Coast architecture to them, and I actually felt really over it. And I think they made me realize how much my work was changing. So I see that when I look at them now, but it's funny, like I keep seeing people posting my work, but it's always like the large pieces. But I actually really like these tiny ones a lot. And yeah, so hopefully they get like noticed. They're funny compared to like the large pieces.
So there are what's the difference between the blue piece and the pink piece?
The difference?
Well, like why pink and why blue?
There's not really there's not really much of a meaning behind that. Um, I use pink, like, undertones in the others, like, they're kind of like going like opposite to each other. So there's like pink undertones in the other figure and in the building. And then if you look at the other one, there's like blue undertones and blue moments in the other like building part. So they kind of like go opposite a little bit. There's like both blue and pink in them.
Does anybody have any questions for Hannah?
Can you tell us more about the build process for, I know you like the smaller pieces, but this larger piece, can you tell us more about the build process for this larger piece in the center?
The building process
Yeah.
it's actually really simple. It's just all coil built, and I just use like really thick coils and build up. But it's actually like really light piece. A lot of the pieces are really lightweight, like how I build them. Especially like in wall pieces and stuff, I don't want them to be like super heavy. Although like they're on cleats and they can be really heavy, but yeah, I just like keeping things lightweight. But yeah, it's coil built. Trying to think of
So can you
anything else.
explain more about that process of coil building? Like how does that work?
So you roll. I wish I was in my studio and I could show you, but you just kind of roll out these long coils and place them on top of each other, and then you just start smoothing as you go along. Or I do at least. I start like as I'm building, I'll start like working out the bottom of the piece.
Okay.
But
And
it's hard to explain coils without doing it in
well,
front of you.
maybe we can look up videos of it, but
We'll do a workshop.
there we go. We're doing a workshop apparently. So also you talk about pieces that that hurt if you touch them. I'm assuming that's obviously the pieces that have cacti on them. But are you also talking about any other pieces? Like maybe, I don't want to guess. Go ahead. Are there any other pieces that, is it just the cacti that you're talking about that hurt when you pick them up, or are you talking about other pieces that you've built as well?
Just like other pieces that aren't in the show.
Oh,
But
okay.
I think that's the only one there that's like really pokey.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you make like other pokey things that aren't cacti, is what you're saying?
Yeah, like they're all like wire,
Ah,
skewers and stuff like that.
okay. Well, we'll check it out. All right, I'll let other people ask questions. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Hi, can you speak a little bit more about your glazing process? I noticed that you have a lot of juxtaposition between matte glazes and more glossy glazes, and all of the faces seem to be more that matte look. I'd just love to hear more about your glazing and how you choose and yeah.
Yeah, I want them to have like an element to realism about them. So like they're mostly matte finishes, but I'll glaze the eyes and water, just anything that's like shiny in reality. Just so you have that like glimmer of reality, even though everything's very stylized. But it's all underglaze painting for the most part. It's all so it's called underglaze because it goes under the glaze, and you can use it like just pretty much any kind of paint really. So I'm brushing it on, even like the stippling, the dots, it's all brush work. And then I choose certain areas to just put clear glaze on, so it's not it's kind of just diving into detailed painting. It's not really complicated glaze wise.
Okay.
But I think there's some in that show where there's like crackle glazes and stuff that I made, but for the most part it's just painted under glaze. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, well, Hannah, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Sorry,
thank
I'm
you.
kind of get my head down. Thank you so much for meeting with us and getting up so early from California. We really
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks.
it.
I hope I gave you a little more.
All right, well, have a good rest of the day. Thank you very much.
If you have any more questions, let me know.
Sounds great. Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye.
All right, so, in our tips, tricks, and strategies, I think Hannah kind of glazed over some of the major concepts behind her work. So I'll explain a little bit more with the next reading on why the big heads, what she's kind of doing. So it's kind of, the biggest thing I think to take away from it is she kind of has like, this one especially is she's talking about, you know, these relationships between people, and during the pandemic this is kind of like this almost relationship with not wanting to get close with people and also kind of having it all out there for you to see kind of thing. It also explains quite a bit in the packet as well, so I'll read over that as well, but I'll go over more in detail during tips and tricks. But Chris